What's up, everybody? This is your man Dre Mack with another episode of the Dre Mack Show. Today, we're actually going to talk about mental health, the untold truth about mental health, domestic violence, and child abuse that is not talked about in our community. We're going to get it together today, only on the Dre Mack Show.
What's up? What's going on, everybody? This is your man Dre Mack with another episode of the Dre Mack Podcast
All right. Once again, this is another episode of the Dre Mack Show. Today, we're going to be talking about the untold trauma and the things that happen within our community. We're going to talk about domestic violence. We're going to talk about the hard stuff. And I have my registered doctor in the house, Dr. Ron G. We're going to be talking about this today. What's going on? Guess she's on mute right now. It's all good. And then I'm also live inside a Clubhouse because when these conversations are coming up, we really don't hear particular type of questions when it comes to this particular type of thing. So yes, I am live inside of Clubhouse. So if you guys want to get inside this conversation, you want to ask questions about particular things that I'm going to be bringing up, most definitely go inside of Clubhouse. All you got to do is look for the club, the Dre Mack Show Live, and you could be able to add yourself into the group. Again, we're live on YouTube, live inside a Clubhouse, and this will go on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Speaker Radio, Spotify, iHeartRadio. We want to be able to have these conversations. That is the biggest thing. And if we're not having these conversations, then I feel like we're doing our people a disservice. And that doesn't just mean Black people, but that just means people, period. So I got Ron G. She's getting herself together real quick. So one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen real quick. And I'm going to bring up a couple of tabs. I want to bring up the first thing that I want to bring up is the domestic violence statistics. And the reason why I want to bring up the domestic violence statistics is because this is something. Where did my screen go? And this is from the national statistics in America. So in this, hold on. Matter of fact, I'm on. Let me not share that portion of the screen. Hold on. Let me go back real quick. And let me move this over to my other screen. There we go. That's what's happening. So I could be able to read this information properly. So we could be able to get a general understanding of why this is so important. And a lot of men actually go through domestic violence too. They go through sexual assault that is actually not talked about. So let me read this, and then I'm gonna read this first, and then I'm gonna talk to Dr. Ron G, and we're gonna start breaking this down, and we're also going to talk about child abuse also and how that plays into a lot of things that we go through as far as like the domestic violence and all of that. So listen to this. It says on average, nearly 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner in the United States. During 1 year, this equates to more than 10 million women and men. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men experience severe intimate partner physical abuse. Intimate partners contact sexual violence and or intimate partner stalking with impacts such as injury, fearfulness, post-traumatic stress disorder, use of victim services, contraction of sexually transmitted diseases, etc. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 women have experienced some form of physical violence by an intimate partner. And this includes a range of behaviors, including, but not excluding, slapping, shoving, pushing, and in some cases might not be considered domestic violence. 1 in 7 women and 1 in 25 women have been injured by an intimate partner. 1 in 10 women have been raped by an intimate partner. Data is unavailable on the male victims. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men have been victims of severe physical violence, i.e., beating, burning, strangling by an intimate partner in their lifetime. 1 in 7 women and 1 in 18 women have been stalked by an intimate partner during their lifetime to the point in which they felt very fearful or believed that they or someone close to them will be harmed or killed. So I'm gonna just stop it just real quick right there. I'm gonna remove this just real quickly from the stream. Dr. Ron G is in the house, so we could be able to talk about this type of thing, and we're also going to bring up sexual abuse when it comes to domestic violence. Dr. Ron G, what's happening?
Hey man, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely. I can hear you. I can hear you wonderfully.
Good. I wanted to be in nature, so I had to get myself together with the light because the sun is this way today instead of
I
the
got
other way.
Oh, I got you. I
Try to
got you.
get myself together.
Absolutely. When you hear this type of information, uh do you see a lot of us in the Black community actually talking about domestic violence and the severe effects of domestic violence, child abuse, so on and so forth?
I see us talking about it more.
Hmm.
But there are certain aspects of it that we don't talk about. We don't talk a lot about the childhood abuse,
Uh-huh.
smacking your kids.
Hmm.
We don't talk about that. A lot of us got whoopings back in
Hmm.
the day. I'm an 80s baby, right?
Right. Me too.
And a lot of us got whoopings.
Hmm.
Some of it I don't necessarily think is abuse, but some of it is. A lot of it is. Especially if
Hmm.
you do it out of anger, you do it without thinking, you do it without talking to your partner.
Hmm.
We don't talk about sexual abuse of boys.
Yes. And
We
I'm
fo-
going to get to that too. Uh-huh.
we focus on the girls
Hmm.
because it does happen more to girls than it does to boys, but we don't talk about what that does to a developing male
Hmm.
when that kind of thing goes out, unless there's a big blow up, right? We had the Sandusky thing that
Yes.
came out several years ago. We had the big priest blowout
Hmm.
in the middle 2000s, right?
Yes. Hmm.
So we had that, but then we stopped talking about it. Like we got on the priest and we got on Sandusky, but we didn't talk about the hundreds of boys and what their life looks like with their wives and their children. We
Hmm.
also, I'm gonna talk about something. Women gonna get mad at me right now. We don't talk about domestic violence towards men. You
Hmm.
smack your man in the mouth, or you punch your man because he's cheating, or he's this, or he's says something disrespectful, and you go, "Boop," that's
Hmm.
domestic violence.
Right.
But
And then
we,
I brought up that statistic too, that 1 in 7 men have been victims of severe physical violence, i.e., beating, burning, strangling by an intimate partner in their lifetime.
yeah,
So I wanted to make sure that I pull up the statistics, which is a lot. If you really think about it, that's actually a large number
that is
of
a huge number.
1 in 7, of the men. And most of the time, those are the ones who are just talked about, like when we're going to talk about sexual abuse.
Yeah,
Those are just the ones that's actually talked about
right,
and documented, because
right,
most men that's going through that do not call the police and say this woman is attacking me.
right.
Most of it gets, it goes under the radar, so it could be a larger number than that. So that's actually a very good point.
Well, what I wanted to kind of focus on in my small statement right now is what usually happens
Hmm.
is that you know um you'll get in your partner's face as a woman. You'll start with the name calling and the yelling, all up in his face. You'll pop him, and he pops you back. Now, because he's a man, you feel his more than he feels yours, and now
Right.
you're bleeding, but you started it. So,
Mm-hmm.
but we have to, what I don't want to say you started it like you deserve to get popped by a man. What I'm saying is that we don't equate what we do to the man as domestic violence, because his frame is so much larger than ours,
Right.
that when he pops you back, or he starts, you feel it so much more, and then you lose complete control of the situation. But the initial pop on him, that
Mm-hmm.
was domestic violence.
Mm-hmm.
He just ended the fight. So we have to kind of focus on that. Women don't like to talk about that. Women don't like to talk about that.
Well, absolutely. I'm going to bring up this is something I actually really want to discuss, because when we start talking about domestic violence, we also have to equate that the majority of the time that domestic violence leads to the homicide rate too. And that comes from both sides. And again, for everybody that's coming in, I am live on YouTube right now. So make sure that you get the likes up if you're on the YouTube channel. Make sure that you're liking and subscribing. I'm also live on Clubhouse. So if you hear dings and you hear people talking, that's because people are going to come in to listen on Clubhouse. And at the end of the night, we're going to have a question. We're going to have a question and answering period. So if guys who are listening on Clubhouse, we are live on YouTube. If you have questions about this, we are going to be able to bring you up and ask particular questions, so we can be able to get the best answers possible, because our main thing is healing, and make sure that we are talking about these particular type of things, so we can be able to give the best resources possible for people. But while I'm saying that, I want you to check this out. It says intimate partner violence accounts for 15% of all crimes.
Mm-hmm.
So 15% of actual crimes is done by domestic violence. 15% all starts. And when I did the information, when I looked at the homicide rate in Kansas City, that homicide rate, 85% of the homicides that was in Kansas City in 2020 equated to the start of some type of domestic violence.
Mm-hmm.
So that means there was an argument, there was something that happened prior to the actual homicide that led to it. So that is something that actually really needs to be talked about. So listen to this. The presence of gun violence and domestic violence situation increases the risk of homicide by 500%. On a I'm reading this backwards, so please, if you're seeing this on the screen, I'm reading this actually backwards, because I'm trying to hit some highlights so people can be able to get a real generalization of what's going on. So on a typical day there is more than 20,000 phone calls plus the domestic violence hotlines nationwide. um Women between the ages of 18 to 24 are most likely abused by their partner. So
Yeah.
think about that for just a second, young people. And I'm looking at the camera on this. Women between 18 and 24 are more commonly to be abused by their partner than anyone else.
Yeah.
That is a humongous statistic when you're looking at the overall age range. So you have to be careful about who you're talking to and the people that you're dealing with, because that can lead to some type of domestic violence. You have to be very careful. We're talking about that. 19% of domestic violence involves a weapon. Domestic victimization correlated with a higher rate of depression and suicidal behavior. That goes into the mental health portion of that. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen real quick, because I don't want to cut your face off. When you hear those particular type of statistics, when you hear a higher rate of depression, of suicide, does that correlate to a lot of the hurt people when they're going into the next relationship with the person?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. We also don't want to forget about verbal abuse,
Yes,
because verbal
absolutely.
and
And Jericho said
emotional
that too.
verbal and emotional abuse, like Jericho says,
Yeah.
are both in equal stands because
Mm-hmm.
they leave long term effects on the mind and the spirit, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about what verbal abuse looks like.
Yes.
Okay,
Speak to that.
verbal abuse, you fat ass B,
Mm-hmm.
verbal abuse. B ass N,
Mm-hmm.
verbal abuse. Okay, I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying not to cuss too much, right?
Right. Right.
I'm trying to maintain some ladylike presence when we talk about this.
Right.
Okay,
Absolutely.
you ain't shit.
Mm-hmm.
You ain't never gonna be shit.
Mm-hmm.
These are things that even down to when your children, when they're younger, hear, "I don't need a man."
Mm.
That can be verbal abuse as well because you are, in a sense, creating a violent track towards the opposite sex.
Mm.
Women ain't shit. When your
Mm.
children hear this kind of thing, women ain't nothing but hoes and tricks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When your children hear this kind of thing, you're creating mental and emotional pathways in their spirit and their mind where they
Mm.
remember this and they fall back on it emotionally. Let's talk about what emotional abuse looks like.
Yes. Speak on
Withholding sex when you're angry, it's emotional abuse. Not talking to your partner.
that.
Um,
Mm. Hold on.
and
Oh, we lost your audio just for a second, but you're good. We're back.
okay, I'm back.
Mm-hmm. You're
So
back.
did we hear the withholding sex?
Go ahead. Say that one more time. I don't think it was heard.
Okay, withholding sex is emotional violence.
And speak on that
Okay,
just for a second, since you're saying that. Speak on that and how that affects the relationship, the partners, the mental health of the partner.
okay. Well, what a lot of people, especially women, think that, and this is in an intimate partner situation. We're not talking about in a dating situation. That's not
Mm-hmm.
what we're talking about. We're talking about two people who are committed to each other.
Yes.
Okay. Either in marriage or whatever that looks like for you. Two people that have
Yes.
committed to each other. A lot of people, especially women, think that sex is supposed to be a reward. So if
Mm.
you do well,
Oh,
then you get
you
sex.
about to ruffle some feathers now. You about to ruffle some feathers now, Doc.
So let's talk about a husband and wife situation, right? If we're getting along, if you do well, then you get sex,
Mm,
right? Okay. But
mm,
what actually it is, sex is a way for two people to connect intimately, mentally, and spiritually. So
mm-hmm.
the truth is, the more sex you have, the less arguments you'll have. The
Because you're
more
having a
sex
healthy
you
sexual
have, the
relationship.
more connected you will be, the
Mm,
more you will be willing and open to hear each other, speak
mm,
to each other in a loving manner. It's not you speak to me in a loving manner, then I give you sex.
That's deep. I didn't. This is blowing my mind just hearing this, y'all. This is blowing my mind. This is deep. Go ahead, keep speaking. Keep them likes up on the YouTube channel. Keep
Okay.
these likes up. Make sure you guys are sharing this. People need to hear this right now. If you're on the Facebook page, share this. Women, men need to hear this.
Right.
Say that one more time for the people in the back.
Okay. Okay. So again, I'm going to reiterate that this is a intimate, committed relationship that we're talking about. We're not talking about dating. We're
Mm,
not talking about we on the third date and you ought to give me sex. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about an intimate, committed relationship, either that's marriage or something that looks like that. Okay, something that two people have committed to and are exclusive to in that particular situation. When
mm-hmm.
you have an intimate, committed relationship, sex is no longer a reward. It
Mm,
is a healthy part of the relationship, just like communication is not a reward. It is a healthy part of the relationship. And what
mm,
often happens is that people think, especially women, that if we're getting along,
mm-hmm.
then I'm supposed to give you sex.
Mm,
No, it's I'm giving you sex, which is one of the reasons why we're getting along
mm,
because we are connected. Couples that have more sex, again, this is an intimate, committed relationship. I'm not talking
Yes.
about somebody you're dating.
Yes.
Okay, I want to put that out there. Couples that have more sex and don't use sex as a weapon and don't withhold sex from each other are more intimately, spiritually, mentally, and emotionally connected. Therefore, have less disagreements, less arguments, and when there are disagreements, those disagreements are exponentially more calm
Mm.
because they're already connected on that plane.
Mm-hmm.
You no longer reward. Sex is an intimate part, I mean, an important part of an intimate, committed relationship.
Mm. Mm.
Okay. So
Mm.
if you're withholding intimate and integral parts of your relationship from your partner, man or woman,
Mm-hmm.
or you're going outside of the agreements
Mm.
between that man or woman, and I'm using man and woman as a general. We don't want to, not
Yes.
to be kind
Yes.
of other
Just
type of
general.
alternative lifestyle relationships,
Yes.
woman to woman, man to man. We're not, knocking that. At least I'm not.
Right.
So when you go outside of those agreements
Mm-hmm.
or you withhold that intimacy within that agreement, you are being sexually violent.
Mm.
You are being emotionally violent to
Mm.
your partner at that time. When
Mm.
you withhold communication, the silent treatment,
Mm.
you are being emotionally violent to that person. You are using it as a way to manipulate and control that person.
Got you. Got
This
you.
is
Oh.
a form of abuse.
Mm.
So you don't talk to your partner for 3 days, you're abusing them. And you're doing it on purpose. And you're doing it to manipulate.
Mm. That is good. That is good. Again, I'm live on YouTube and I'm live inside of Clubhouse right now, the app Clubhouse. So make sure you guys are that want to come up, that's in the audience. If you're in the audience, we're gonna bring you up at a later portion of the day. So make sure that your mics are muted and everything because we want to hear questions. We're gonna have a question and answering section. So all you guys make sure that you just stay on mute. We're gonna answer questions in a little bit, but this is the conversation that we need to have, and we're gonna switch this a little bit because when we start talking about the untold trauma, we just start talking about withholding sex. Now we're about to get to the real portion of this when we start talking about rape, because this is where the shift really happens. So I'm going to read the statistics because I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to share the statistics real quick. And just give me a second here while I get that. I got to share my screen real quick. All right, so if you look here, if you're on the YouTube channel, if you look here, it says 1 in 5 women and 1 in 71 men in the United States have been raped in their lifetime. Almost half of females, 46.7%, and males, 44.9%, victims of rape in the United States were raped by an acquaintance. Of these, 45.4% of female rape victims and 29% of male rape victims were raped by an intimate partner. So when we're looking at these statistics, those statistics, again, when you're talking about rape and we're talking about rape within men, these are the ones who's actually have came forward. There's probably way more men that's actually been raped in some form of time in their lifetime that has not been talked about on here. So Dr. Ryan is still with us right now. When we're talking about 1 in 5 women have been raped and 1 in 7 1 in 71, excuse me, men have been raped in their lifetime, and they were either raped by acquaintance or their partner. We're talking about that could be from child abuse or from adulthood. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the mental side of that. You're on mute. You're on mute.
Yeah, I'm
There
back. I'm
you go.
back. because I don't want you guys to hear a lot of background noise while Dre is talking. So that's why I did that. So while we're talking about rape, let's talk about actually the statistics are wrong. And the reason that they're wrong is because, and I'll address Jericho in a minute. The reason that they're wrong is because we don't add in prison. When we add in prison, men actually the numbers start to equalize out.
Yes, absolutely. It does. It starts to get higher.
Yes, for
Yes.
men.
Yes.
That men get raped more than women when we add in prison.
Yes. Yes.
So that's something, I don't know how far Dre wants to take that, but
no, we gotta talk about
okay.
the truth. We got to talk about the truth, because the only way, again, that we're going to heal as a people, if we get to the roots of these things and talk about the truth. So we want to get to the truth.
So what happens with rape is that it is murder kills the body, rape kills the soul. So when you have a rape victim, male or female, and if you were thinking about some of the things that happen to boys or younger teenage boys and how they can be raped, you can think of it like on Antoine Fisher.
Yes.
Where the little boy was being forced to perform sexual acts on his big cousin.
Yes.
That's rape. That's what rape of a little boy would look like.
Yes.
From female to male.
Yes.
Okay. And that happens as well. So when you have those kind of actions perpetrated on a mind, it warps the psyche. It tricks the psyche into no longer seeing the world as they saw it before.
Yes.
So if they thought the world was safe before, nothing is safe again.
Yes.
Right? And and you question who you are, how you got there, you question if it was your fault and how much of life is your fault.
Yes.
You question just who you are as a person, because what you have to understand, especially when this happens to young people, is that when you are not quite developed yet, which is what a young person is, a not quite developed person, it puts a complete wrench in that development.
Yes.
And it's hard to work around that. It's hard to get over it. Okay. Because you constantly relive it in your mind. You are I see Norman.
We're gonna get to the questions. We're gonna get to the questions at the end once we discuss everything, Norman.
Right.
We got you. We ain't forgetting about you.
Right. You are it's like throwing a wrench into a wooden wheel, and then some of those spokes break. In order for you to continue the trip, you've got to fix those spokes.
Absolutely.
Okay, does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Jericho, silence. I'm not talking about let's calm down, because we're escalating and go to separate corners and then come back together. I think that's what Jericho is trying to refer to. I'm not saying let's shut down because we're escalating, we're getting, we're hitting below the belt. Let's calm down, go to separate corners, talk in the morning. See, I'm communicating to you what's happening in the situation, and I'm bringing a promise of when the communication is going to return.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm talking about ignoring your partner for 4 or 5 days.
Right.
Or even if you say somebody does something to you in this intimate partner, and you say, I need a couple of weeks to process this, so I can't deal with you for a couple of weeks until I process what you just told me. Okay, then we can come back together and talk about it, or whatever the case may be. Again, that is you communicating what's going to happen why that needs to happen, and when you're going to come back together to either discuss the problem or dissolve the relationship.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Norman asks, is abuse a learned behavior, and are most abusers narcissists? Um, yeah, I just want to address you, Jericho. Yeah. So, okay, so everybody has the capacity to use and abuse their partner.
Mm-hmm.
What the difference is between somebody who's emotionally mature and who's a narcissist is the narcissist gets off on it. They're trying to make you seem crazy, like it's your fault you're being abused by me. A normal person, or what we would call an emotionally mature person, recognizes that maybe that action wasn't the best action, are able to talk that out with their partner and not do that again, not repeat that same situation. So that the next time there's anger involved or fear involved, the next time there is a miscommunication or a misunderstanding, the
Mm-hmm.
repeat of that behavior doesn't occur.
Right.
That's the difference between. So I don't want you to think that anybody that has ever said, you ain't shit, is an abuser. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
That person at the time may not have been emotionally mature, but they can tell you that wasn't the right thing for me to say.
Right.
What I was feeling at the time was this. This is how I should have communicated that so we could learn to understand each other, and I'll never do that again.
Mm-hmm.
And then actually follow up with those words.
Absolutely. Let's go back. Let me go back real quick. I'm gonna share my screen again. And we're going to talk about children and domestic violence, because a lot of children actually see or experience domestic violence in their lifetime. So let's speak on this. 1 in 15 children are exposed to intimate partner violence each year, and 90% of these children are eyewitnesses to this violence.
Right.
So when you have these particular type of situations that's going on, children are actually watching this. And when Norman said, is it abuse or learned behavior? If 90% of
Yes.
children are witnessing violence, I would say yes. The
Yes.
statistics can prove that you can learn the behavior from what you see. And if all you see is domestic violence, then that's what's actually going to happen. You could go to a point where, because you've seen it so much, that you think it's okay,
Right.
especially if there was no healing, there was no a therapy, there was no counselor, there was nothing that actually diffused those situations. You just seen people fighting all the time. Let's talk about that.
So fighting or domestic abuse within a family imprints on the mind of children. It imprints on them. So it becomes part of who they are. It becomes part of their way to see the world. It becomes part of the way that they reason the world back and forth. Okay? Because there's two things going on in the psyche. How you see yourself, and then how the world sees you,
Mm-hmm.
and the interaction between those two, right? So when a individual grew up in a household where there was domestic violence, and
Mm-hmm.
remember, domestic violence is not just punching and kicking and scratching and slapping. Domestic violence is also emotional. Domestic
Mm-hmm.
violence is also mental. Domestic violence is also verbal. So when you hear, see, the saying, hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil,
Mm-hmm.
because it imprints on the mind. It imprints on the mind, and it changes a child's way of interacting with the world.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if a young man who's seen his mom get beat up by his dad,
Mm-hmm.
he thinks that's the way to interact with women.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see what I'm saying? Just like if he saw his dad interacting with his mom in a loving way, and they were constantly laughing and playing with each other and kissing around, that
Exactly.
will imprint on the mind as well.
Absolutely.
So more than likely, that's how he will treat his woman when he gets older. Same thing goes for women. If you hear your mom say every single day of your life that I don't need a man, what do you grow up saying?
Yes.
I don't need a man, right?
Mhm.
But
Right.
if you see your mom loving on men, loving on her father and loving on her brothers and loving on her man and, having healthy relationships with friends of the family who are males and this kind of stuff. Oh, my hair is actually pretty. I'm tripping. Okay. When if you see that, then that is also, it imprints on the mind, and that is
Mhm.
also how you see, the opposite sex, how you see men, and how you strive to interact with men once you become a grown woman in charge of her own, way of interacting with the world.
Absolutely. Let's go. Let me go to this. And Jericho actually made a good point from the Facebook page. She said, "Think about Purple Rain, the movie, as an example of that." And
Mhm.
absolutely. And I can even speak to, if you see domestic violence, you know it could go two ways. You could be a person who actually starts to be the aggressor, or you won't even be aggressive at all because you'd be so afraid to become this particular person that you grew up and you saw. So
Right.
there's a lot of mental. This is why we're talking about untold trauma, because this is what we go through as far as, a society. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
We see these untold traumas, and then we get in relationships, and then we find out all that repressed trauma that you had started to interfere in your relationships. And this is the reason why we're talking about it now. But let's talk about the physical and mental impact when it comes to domestic violence. And then we're going to actually go after this. We're going to go to child abuse. So if these are tough situations or tough conversations to have, I would say leave now. But if you're willing to listen to the actual statistics and we're listening to what's going on, this could be able to help someone who actually has been through this. So let's talk about this for just a second. Women abused by their intimate partners are more vulnerable to contracting HIV
Yeah.
or other STIs due to the forced intercourse or prolonged exposure to stress.
Yes.
Studies suggest that there's a relationship. I'm not sharing this. I'm sorry, y'all. Um, Studies suggest that there is a relationship between intimate partner violence and depression and suicidal behavior. Physical, mental, and sexual and reproductive health effects have been linked with intimate partner violence, including adolescent pregnancy, unattended pregnancies in general, miscarriage, stillbirth, intrauterine hemorrhage. I probably destroyed that. Uh, nutritional deficiencies, abnormal pain, I'm sorry, abdominal pain, and other gastrointestinal problems, neurological disorders, chronic pain, disabilities, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, as well as communicable diseases such as hypertension, cancer, cardiovascular disease. Victims of domestic violence are also at a higher risk for developing addictions to alcohol, tobacco, and drugs. And this is literally a microcosm of today's society. Go ahead and speak to that, because I'm getting amped up, but literally, this is a microcosm. Go ahead and speak to that.
So I think we're kind of getting some definitions mixed up.
I probably did.
Because that's this comment I wanted to see, that trauma is a normal part of development. No, it isn't. I'm sorry. No, it is not.
Go ahead
Trauma is
and speak to
not a normal part of development.
that.
What we are equating, I think that a lot of us, because we don't have the emotional development that we think we do. And I'm just talking about in general, I'm not talking about anybody specific.
Mhm.
Because we don't have the emotional development that we think we do, we think that trauma is a part of life. And it is not.
Right,
It
right,
is not. There are only three emotions: there is fear, there is hurt, which is a violation of boundaries, and there is love. Okay? When you have domestic violence, sexual abuse, rape, these are the extremities beyond a healthy dose of fear. Okay? Um, a healthy dose of hurt. Okay, a healthy dose of, like for instance, I'll give you an example. A healthy dose of fear, right, would be a big dog behind a gate barking at you. As a 5 or 6 year old, you get scared, right?
Yes.
An
Absolutely.
unhealthy dose of fear is that big dog jumping up over that fence and biting your leg off. That's not healthy. That's two
Right.
different things.
Right.
Okay? That's two different things. A healthy dose of hurt, okay, is somebody steals your toy. Your favorite toy is stolen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Healthy dose. Unhealthy dose of hurt, which is violation of boundaries, is somebody sticking a 35-year-old Peter in your booty hole.
Mm-hmm.
Not healthy.
Right.
One is a healthy part of life
Mm-hmm.
that you need to learn how to deal with appropriately. One is trauma.
Right. Right. And that's why this, Norman, is called Untold Trauma. The
Right.
things that we're not talking about as much. And then the people that go through molestation, seeing domestic violence, seeing drug and alcohol abuse, grow up to be adults, and it's hard to function because we never talk about the trauma, the untold trauma.
Right.
You go to church, and we've all heard stories about going to a church and the pastor's doing something, or the or somebody, someone's touching on kids and in the Catholic Church, or these particular type of things. Those are things that we hear, but there's also certain things that we grow up that we went through. We grew up, we were told to forget about it, walk it off.
Right.
Real talk. Walk it off. Don't worry about it. You know what I'm saying? You better not tell on Uncle Junebug. You know what
Right.
I'm saying? Because Uncle Junebug is our favorite uncle, even though he's been molesting. You know what I'm saying? Your favorite cousin, male cousin, female cousin.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? For the majority of his life. Those are people who grow up, and then you wonder why people lash out. You wonder why
Right.
people have these mental problems that gets to the surface, and then only thing we can say is these people are crazy, or this person is the common word now, toxic.
Right.
Toxic is poison. Poison leads to death. When you see a label that has a skull and crossbone on it, it says toxic. Why would you go into a relationship, people, and say I want a toxic relationship? These are the things that we're talking about. That's untold trauma being surfaced, and now we think it's cute.
Right.
So that's why
Right.
we want to
So
talk
there,
about
there are certain things that are part of life
yes,
that hurt. Okay.
yes,
Grandma dying,
yes,
that hurts.
yes,
Right. So when you lose a loved one, because there are certain things that hurt that are part of life.
yes.
Right. Rape is
It's
not part
not.
of life.
No.
Right. Having your sexuality snatched from you
Thank you.
is
Yes,
not part of life.
yes,
Having getting your butt beat by an individual who you're supposed to trust and love, that's not a part of life. So we
yes,
need to talk about what it means to hurt, what it means to how to emotionally grow as people and deal with things that are naturally part of life.
yes,
Even if I like that Norman brought up that losing a loved one is traumatic. I
yes,
like that he brought that up because some people can see it as traumatic, but it's actually not. It's actually a part of life, even when you lose your child, because people get sick and die. People
yes.
contract leukemia
Mm-hmm.
and die, and it was nothing that nobody did, nothing that nobody, you know what I'm saying? Now it is very hurtful. It is a violation of my boundary, because how did my baby die, especially before me? You know what I'm saying? That kind of thing. How did I lose my 2, 3, 4, 5 year old, 14-year old to this illness? But illness is a part of life. Rape, getting beat, being slaves, that kind of thing is not a part of life, y'all.
Absolutely.
That kind of thing is
Absolutely.
not a part of the natural progression of life.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's go to this, because this is where it starts to get heavy. and we have to talk about child sexual abuse
Yeah.
statistics. And the reason why we have to talk about this because there's grown people who have been through sexual abuse that doesn't get talked about.
Yeah.
And they have so many issues in relationships when it comes to this. So let me talk about this just for let me give you the statistics first. So it says 1 in 5 girls and 1 in 20 boys is a victim of child sexual abuse.
Hmm.
Self-report studies show that 20% of adult females and between 5 and 10% of adult males recall a childhood sexual assault or sexual abuse incident. During a 1 year period in the United States, 16% of youth ages 14 to 17 have been sexually victimized. Think about that for a second. I'm just let that marinate. 16% of youth ages of 14 to 17 have been sexually victimized. Over a course of their lifetime, 28% of the US youth ages between 14 and 17 have been sexually victimized. Children are most vulnerable to CSA, child sexual abuse, between the ages of 7 and 13. And
Yeah.
I'm saying, and this is going to follow up, and then we're going to talk about it. According to the 2003 National Institute of Justice report, 3 out of 4 adolescents who have been sexually assaulted were victimized by someone they knew well. Let's talk about that. I'm going to take that off my screen real quick. Let's talk about that for just a second, because this right here is personal for me.
Yeah.
This hits the
Personal for me too.
this hits the hardest for me because you hear the stories, you
Mhm.
know someone, you know victims,
You are that
you,
someone.
you are that
Yeah.
someone. And
One of those three. One of
yeah,
those.
you're one of those three.
Yeah.
And we have people that grow up and have no complete clue of the trauma that endures to that, growing up with that. Let's talk about that for a second. And then after we talk about that, I'm going to open up questions from Clubhouse after that. But let's talk about that. Let's talk about the statistic. 14 is between ages of 14 to 17 have been sexually victimized. Let's talk about that.
Well, I don't know what you want me to say. Watch
Like
where
the
the
mental
kids
health. Let's
go.
let's talk about the mental health aspect, because those are, let's say, 14 to 17. Those are high school years.
Yeah.
Those are high
Yeah.
school years. Let's talk about the mental health capacity of a high school student that has been victimized.
Well, in my professional and personal opinion, those are your developing years going into your polishing years, right?
Mhm.
Because for me, 17 to about 23 is the years where your parents kind of polish you up for life, get you ready. 17 to 25, if we want to go a little further, depending on, how you grew up. So 14 or maybe 13 to 17 is the time where you're developing and finding out who you are. Okay. And
Mhm.
when you add sexual abuse into that,
Yes.
okay, when you add sexual abuse into that, again, think of the wheel with the wrench being thrown in, okay, and
Mhm.
the spokes are broken, so you're completely discombobulated about who you are. So that pathway that you were on to get to who you were supposed to be, wanted to be, was going to be, is
Yes.
completely out of whack.
Yes.
That's completely out of whack and has to be addressed head on in
Mhm.
order to be put back on the right track.
Yeah.
And what happens is a lot of individuals who go through that between those ages, especially between those ages, keep going on with what they think life is, and they never address it, and they never hear from it. So now here come babies, and now here come partners, right? And now here come responsibilities as an adult,
Right.
and you didn't spend that time, or nobody, it really isn't, because from 14 to 17 your brain isn't finished growing until the age of 27. That's for everybody. Everybody's brain between the ages of 25 and 27 does not stop developing. Your frontal lobe here is not completely developed until about the age of 26, 27 years old for everybody, male and female. So if you throw a wrench in the middle of somebody's brain, what do you think is going to happen? And that's what sexual abuse is. And the younger you do it, it doesn't matter. It's I hate when people say things like, well, I just wanted him to forget, or I just wanted her to forget. You want them to forget a wrench in their brain? Like, Dre, literally, if I put a wrench in one of your baby's brains right now, you think they're going to forget about a big ass wrench sticking out their brain?
Right.
And just because you can't see it, a lot of this has to do with the adults too. A lot of child sexual abuse has to do with adults because adults don't want to deal with that problem. They don't want to put in energy into healing that child, even though it's 100% their responsibility.
Right.
100%, but they don't want to deal with it because it brings up different emotions in them as well. Embarrassment, guilt, a whole slew of emotions, not being able to protect your kid, taking accountability for what was going on in your particular psyche that led your child to be unprotected and therefore get sexually abused.
Absolutely.
Right. And so what we're having is kind of like a magenta. We're having like kind of like a magenta, which is a mix of all kinds of colors. Right. Hey, Erica, a whole bunch of colors that are mixed up together that we're not sorting out. So what sexual abuse, child sexual abuse actually does, it becomes a whole family problem. It becomes a whole family issue. It's not just the no, honey, most sexual abusers were sexually abused as children. They weren't just bullied. Oh, I see what you're saying, Norman. What we were talking about, I thought, okay, I read that wrong. Anyway, so when it becomes a whole family problem, and then the entire family ignores it, what do you think that tells the child that was the actual victim?
Yeah.
That tells the child to ignore problems, even as major as sexual abuse, that they don't matter, that their word doesn't matter, their boundaries don't matter, their protection doesn't matter, that the people that were supposed to protect them lied. You have to translate into their mind. It might not have actually lied, but if you as a 35-year-old adult act like your 13-year-old wasn't sexually abused, what do you think that's going to tell them? That they don't deserve any justice. They don't deserve to confront their accuser. They don't deserve to have their voice heard. They don't deserve to be protected.
Right. And again, this is the reason why, if you see the correlation of sexual abuse, and this is the reason why I brought both of those up, because there's a correlation between child sexual abuse and domestic violence.
Yes, there is.
Because there's a gigantic, you can see the statistics is almost lining up, where you start talking about mental health issues, and then you have people who do domestic violence situations. They go down, get a mental health evaluation. Oh, here come all this trauma. Well, this person has went through this, that, and the other. So all of these things are correlated together. And this is the reason why we want to have this conversation. I'm going to go ahead.
I wanted to translate what you just said into what it looks like in real life.
Yes.
That's what I wanted to do. So imagine you had a 7-year-old boy who was sexually abused, right? And then the family ignored it. Right? We got him away from the abuser, but we never addressed it. We never went to counseling. We never worked on healing as a family. We never took accountability around him. We never, came into rank, right?
Right.
What that translates into is a 35-year-old man, when there are problems, tells his woman to shut the fuck up. What that translates into is when your child needs to be, let's say your child fell out of a tree and he scraped his knee, or he, sprained his leg or something like that. You say, man up, deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what that translates into, because that's what he was told whenever his trauma came up.
Yes.
So they don't, the emotional stuntedness is what comes out in a 35-year-old man who's been abused when he was 13, when he was
Yes.
12, and the family ignored it.
Yes.
Okay.
And we had
Yeah,
that.
lack
We
of
literally had,
emotional connection. Yes.
right. And we had that conversation yesterday where when we were talking about the things that men go through when people's like, oh, you could get over it, or so what? The so what? This is the reason why, because statistics are saying that this is happening. Homicide rates, all of this is going on. Sexual abuse and all of this is going on. Well, where's the root of that? If we're starting at the root of there's child sexual abuse that goes on, if there's domestic violence that the child is seeing, child grows up. Child turns around and starts being a sexual abuser, or turns around thinking it's okay to get a gun because I'm emotionally detached. You know what I'm saying? I don't really care because I've been through all this trauma. Think about it. I've been through all this trauma. Now I feel like I could just kill people because I don't care about myself, because nobody took the time out to care about me when I went through my trauma.
That's right. And
Do
that's
you
what
see
that
this?
translates into.
It's 360.
It is.
It's a 360 effect. And the only way that we are going to cut down, when they say, well, how can, and you hear this, and I'm gonna go to questions here in a second. How do we cut down the homicide rate in the black community? I'm talking about black folks now. I ain't talking about nobody else. I'm talking about us. When we are not discussing these things that go in our community, we can't turn around and be like, well, we need to stop the violence. We don't even talk about the root of it to go ahead and say we need to stop the violence. We
Now,
need to get to the root of it.
Erica said there's a feeling of being worthless. There is either a lack of emotional connection, or there's a feeling of being worthless. Actually, that's the same thing. One is outward and one is inward. So feeling worthless is a lack of emotional connection to oneself.
Right. Absolutely.
That's what feeling worthless means.
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And before we get to the questions, I want to do this. And I'm going to post this up. If you are a victim of domestic violence, or if you've been a victim of sexual assault, there is hotline numbers that you could call. There's hotline numbers locally, but this is the hotline.org number. It is 1-800-799-7233 or 1-800-799-SAFE. Again, that's 1-800-799-7233. If you don't feel comfortable talking, you can do a chat. You can also text. You can text START to 1-800-799-7233. Text START to 1-800-799-7233, because it's very important that if you are a victim of these things, that we get you the help that you need. Right. So anybody in the audience for Clubhouse, this is your, if you guys want to ask any questions, you could be able to go now, or if you have any statements before we start wrapping it up, this is you guys' time now.
Now, I do want to say, if I could, that most people who are sexually abused, in particular, do not become sexual abusers. Yes. The statement is that most sexual abusers have been sexually abused. That doesn't mean that most people who are sexually abused become abusers. That's two different statements. Right. Now, what happens is most people that are abused have their spokes broken in their will. If you want to translate that into a spiritual saying, is that their chakras won't align, can't align. They're having problems aligning those spiritual elements, spiritual, emotional, mental elements, and physical elements within themselves. Now, what that looks like for women and men is that, let's just think of, there are 6 of them, right? And they go from here down to your genital area, right? The For men, the outcome of your penis doesn't align with the machinations of your mind.
Mm-hmm.
That's what that means. So and that can be physical abuse,
Mm-hmm.
childhood trauma, adult trauma, and sexual abuse. That can be
Yes.
all that, because your children don't go to prison, right? So
Yes.
that can happen while you're a 23-year-old man in a 10-year bid in prison.
Yes.
And then when you come out, the outcome of your penis does not align with what you want in your heart and what you see as vision, purpose, and mission in your mind.
Hmm.
That's what that looks like for a man.
Mm-hmm.
What it looks like for a woman is who you let into your vagina
Mm.
does not line up with the machinations in your mind. So the vision and mission and purpose you have for yourself as a woman is not aligned with who you let into your vagina. And
Mm.
that goes all the way through your heart, your stomach. It also, for a lot of people, what you put into your mouth, the
Mm.
drugs, the
Mm-hmm.
too much food, the too
Mm-hmm.
much alcohol,
Mm-hmm.
the hanging around the wrong crowd, which is an influence here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So all that's what that looks like. So this what I'm not trying to I'm trying to translate the things that
Yes.
Ray is saying
Yes.
into what it looks like in real life,
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
because that's the part we're missing.
Right, absolutely. So I'm opening it up to anybody that's in Clubhouse right now. If you want to ask questions or you have a statement, this is your guys' time now. If you want to speak, just limit it to like a 30-second or a quick question or a 30-second statement, so we could go ahead and get to the process of wrapping that up.
Good afternoon, good night, good evening. My name is Young Mike Getting It. How you doing? Hola. I'm Russia. I wanted to say to you that the doctor, that's your doctor, right?
Go. No, he's talking to you. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes.
Your doctor. I want to say thank you for coming on to Dre Mac's platform and collaborating with him, because you definitely have touched so many different things. Definitely missed out on the eyes of many folks. So especially amongst the teaching our children the whole abuse situation, how we teach boys not to hit girls, but we don't teach girls not to hit boys when they get older. You understand? Like that.
Yes.
That was amazing.
Thank you. That's what Dre asked me to do. So hopefully I'm doing it.
Yes. Yes. Walking in that purpose. Anyone else wants to want to come on and have a statement, a quick statement, or a question before we start wrapping it up?
Thank you, Dr. G. Good information this day. My name's Steve. I've known a lot about going through things. I was molested by two young ladies in my community between like 6 and 9, multiple times. And when I went to my grandma's house, it was a girl next door that was doing it. When I went to my grandpa's house, it was a girl across the street that was doing it. And that kind of made me like really sexually active at an early age. But then I also started to, once I started having kids, I got real in depth on changing that lifestyle for my kids. So I thank you for putting a key on that. And I feel like we should talk about stuff like this more, because in our culture, it goes on so much and it's so quiet kept how much, even with men and young ladies, how much these things happen. When we playing cards, having spade games, there's so many things going on when we ain't watching it. I'm one of them key people that get up from the card table and be like, I'm going to check on the kids, and everybody else be like, would you leave them kids alone? No, man, I know what be going on. I'm going to check and see if they playing the game. Look what I got.
Right. Absolutely.
Thank you, Dr. G. And thanks, Dre Mac, for bringing Dr. G on.
You know, this is what the format is for. This is what the podcast is for, so we could be able to teach. I think Sassy, did you want to speak?
I was just agreeing with Steven. I have two kids, and I'm not
the mom that sits here and let the kids just, all be together without checking on them. I'm the mom that's like, wait a minute, hey, what's going on? I need to be able to see y'all and hear y'all because kids get curious. I'm not a Rugrats parent. We used to watch Rugrats and the parents was always gone for a very long time. Nah, that ain't me. I'm not that parent at all. Not at all.
Absolutely. Anyone else before we start closing this thing out?
Just thank you for having us on your platform.
Appreciate it. My man Jay Young, what's up?
Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Do you have YouTube on? Because I hear it echo.
Let me see if I can switch it. Better?
Yeah, we good. We good now.
Is it any echo?
Nah, we good now. Go ahead.
Okay, just want to say even salute to you, Doc. You brought up a lot of very good points. Even Dre Mack, even for having this conversation, this discussion. I wish I was able to even get on last night as well, but just wanted to kind of touch on a few things even you guys spoke about, and even the Doc mentioned as well. Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah, you good. We just be quiet. We listening.
Yeah, go ahead. We listening.
Okay, so I know even earlier, even in the beginning of podcast, you speaking about even abuse, and of course, I was the one, Doc, just so you know, even on Facebook where I even made the comments. Also, so I'm a life coach, so a lot of things you saying, we need to have this conversation. But as I was speaking about, even on the Facebook comment, I was saying a lot of people don't realize how the physical and the verbal is pretty much balanced, and how it can have those long-lasting effects. Because some people, even in relationships, or even like you talking about, even with the children being traumatized, even as a young child, they can have something that their parents is telling them and repeating constantly, like, you stupid, you not nothing. And they take that with them even as they're getting older. The same way, even as a woman or a man, even in a relationship, they don't have to necessarily be physically abused, but they can still carry that on like a physical abuse, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
So later on, they're still dealing with this, or they have those triggers. So even when they get into these certain circumstances later on in life, all that trauma, all those different things they heard comes right back in their head, and they sometimes shut down or don't know how to deal with it if they haven't overcome those issues.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely
Absolutely correct.
And then also, I know you're speaking about even how even the sexual component is very important, even in relationships, because of course it can release stress, decrease tension in relationships, and like you even said, even make for that connection with the relationship, making it better. But everything that you guys have been talking about, and I want the audience and everyone listening to understand as well, even though you're saying trauma and mental health and things, it all goes back to the mental. Mm-hmm. It all goes back to how strong the mind is and how it copes with things, or how it holds on to things. And this is what I even speak about, even as a life coach, even balancing things out to help move people forward, even in life. So even with that sexual component, and I'll just like to break this down for a moment, if you guys don't mind.
Go ahead.
Okay, so even with the even like the sex that you mentioned, Doc, as well, and in my relationship course, I kind of touched on this. And as I was saying, it goes back to mental, because a lot of people do not even realize that sex is really mental. The physical is just the cherry on top. So it's really mental first, then physical. Now, I want everyone that's listening to even think back, no matter what age they are, even when they were teens, right? So even when you were teens and your hormones, started raging, you started getting those thoughts and things like that, you was visualizing even before you ever had any type of sex whatsoever. Even as teenagers, and sometimes even as adults, they have what's considered as wet dreams. So then when you actually started to begin to have physical sex, that was just the cherry on top. So of course,
when you go through different things or you're in a relationship, this is how you can make those connections, because of course you're physically connecting, but it's really that mental connection that you are having. This is also why even at times a lot of people have a lot of conversations after sex, because you're mentally connected and you're relaxed also.
So what do you have to say about that, Doc, before we start wrapping it up? I want you to respond to that real quick.
I want to first say, well, first I want to reiterate that my psychosexual conversation was part of a committed, intimate relationship between people. I want to keep putting that out there, because there is also a situation or a manifestation of abuse when you, man or woman, is having sex with just random people, which is also a manifestation of childhood trauma, childhood abuse that has been untold. So I do want to reiterate that particular part of my discussion was talking about an intimate, committed partnership between two people. I do want to put that out there. What I think, as far as the young man that was speaking, the life coach that was speaking, is what we're also still living in, what is called a Puritan community, a Puritan society. When this country was starting to become colonized, it was the Puritans that came over here, which had a lot of issues concerning psychosexual development of people altogether. And so there is a bunch of issues that we not only have as a people, but we have as an American society that are surrounding what's okay and not okay with discovering about your sex, and how that translates into what it means to become a whole person. So I'll leave it at that. That's something maybe me and that young man and you can talk about at a later time or after the show is over. But
we could discuss that after. We could discuss that after we go off of air. So make sure that you hold that just for a second, Jay. So I could be able to get to anyone else who wants to just speak real quick. So I can go ahead and start. So I can go ahead and wrap this portion up. So if anybody else want to speak before I go ahead and wrap this up. All right. So I thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Dre Mack Show. I appreciate my good Dr. Ron G. I'm just going to take you off of the screen. Do not go anywhere because we're going to talk after the show. So I just want to make sure that I post this up again so everybody can see it. This is again the information hotline. If you have been a victim of domestic violence or any type of sexual assault and you need someone to talk to, please call 1-800-799-7233. Again, that's 1-800-799-7233. You can live chat from the website, which is thehotline.org, or you can text to that number START. Text START to 1-800-799-7233. I thank y'all so very much for tuning in to the Dre Mack Show. I love y'all. Shalom to everyone. I'm out.
What's up? What's going on, everybody? This is your man Dre Mack with another episode of the Dre Mack Podcast Show.